Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman, Kagro, in the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Friday, March 7th, 2025. Time to wrap up the week and begin the chaotic weekend in the Trump era. Trump will be distracted a little bit by golfing, but then loose lips time, downtime for the president, always the most dangerous time. Come up with any sort of weird policy. He might, he might join the Warsaw Pact, who knows, over the weekend. That doesn't exist anymore, but we'll bring it back, just like we used to have when America was great. I did see in the last day or so somewhat surprising news, I guess, although once we saw that there were North Korean soldiers in the field in Ukraine for Russia, I guess it shouldn't have been too much of a surprise, but I guess there's a couple thousand, like 5,000 Cuban troops now reported or apparently also on the ground there. And that's just where we want to be. Back in the days when America was great, we were always aligned, as you may recall, with the Russians, the North Koreans, and the Cubans. That's our team. I don't know. Doesn't seem right, and doesn't seem like he's going to be able to convince even MAGA America that that's the right place to be. But we'll see what happens. We'll see what powers of persuasion he's able to bring to bear. He spent the day yesterday sitting in the Oval Office pontificating again, and Aaron Rupar excerpted everything, and it's all as absurd as the worst moments, and it wasn't even Friday yet. So, looking forward to a weird and wild weekend. We'll try and catch you up so that you are aware of, I think we could probably get you to about 40% of the craziness that we'll have a chance to discuss. You're all pretty well read, though, and most of this stuff, as always, I anticipate you've seen or heard most of this stuff. Maybe you haven't, gone in depth on it necessarily, or like sometimes you're like I am. Oh yeah, I heard that in passing. Someone else brought it up. I'm aware of it, but tell me more. Well, there's plenty of those stories. Scott sent me something yesterday evening that has since been making the rounds like crazy because it is so crazy. Everything we've suspected about the way the DOGE boys are doing their work, and it's been borne out in a number of their forays into the different departments, that it just seems pretty clear like they're literally just taking all their data spreadsheets and searching no terms, things that either relate to DEI. I think they probably actually started out by typing in DEI, and who knows what else they got about that, where the letters might appear in that order in different words, etc. But then they started looking at diversity, diverse, inclusion, include, equality, equity, anything like that. And just whatever they came up with, anything that hit, they just started canceling, because it seems to be their approach to everything. Cancel first, ask questions later, and then also ignore the answers to the questions. But they figure, let's turn everything off, and everybody will just have to justify the entire federal budget and all federal operations over again from the ground up. And I'm sure, in their view, coming from, not only from, well, at least some of the older ones coming from the business world, the younger ones, of course, came from kindergarten and are now running the government. But in their view, not only the business world, but a startup world, where it's almost expected that you won't have any freaking idea what you're doing about anything. I mean, the most common business development trajectory in Silicon Valley startup world is not to know what you're doing and to get yourself maybe barely up off the ground, although you're probably already losing money hand over fist at the point where people begin thinking, I'll be an angel investor, and swoop in, and then along with the money comes a demand that you get a more professional CEO, someone who allegedly does know what they're doing. Not that all of our CEOs are very good, but whatever. So anyway, they come from this background where you can do things like, well, if I don't know exactly what's going on, how about if I turn everything off and we'll turn the pieces on one at a time again, and as we do it, we'll just neglect to turn on the things that we think are wasteful or wrong. But with something as complex as the federal government, it doesn't work that way. You're not looking to turn a profit with it. It's not like a business, and you don't really know how to run a business anyway. So why are you worried about running the government like a business? Anyway, among the latest things turned off and turned back on again, lots of jobs that way. It was the big news from out of the courtroom situations and other fora in which they're negotiating this stuff. Each of these departments that had everybody sent home and the entire workforce dismissed, finding out one at a time, no, actually, it's very important that there be a skeleton crew at least to do this, that, and the other thing, and rehiring them piece by piece. Unclear about whether or not they're able to reach them all. You remember that they early on had difficulty reaching all of the nuclear security people. We fired them and we deleted their access to email, and then we somehow lost their employment records, and we don't even have phone numbers to reach them and tell them they need to come back to work. But apparently across the board, 5,000 Department of Agriculture people who thought they were fired. Well, they were purportedly fired. I guess that's the best way you can possibly say it. The firing was illegal, and they were ordered to be rehired. In some cases, it's difficult to tell in what stage of compliance the government is in some of these things. And they, I think, are telling the courts, all right, we hear you. We'll rehire those people. And then they announce it, and then the newspaper reports 5,000 people rehired, except we don't know. 5,000 people are supposed to be rehired. They say they're going to comply with the order to rehire 5,000 people. You shouldn't print that they've been rehired just yet, though, because sometimes it's just not like that. And you never know until probably until it's too late. Anyway, so as I was saying, they've been searching around looking for terms that they think will offend and turning those things off. And I guess it's reached its absurdist peak at this point. But I've heard stories already about NIH grants that were canceled because as they read the abstract about the project, the word diverse came up. And it wouldn't come up in DEI context, but rather, we are testing an array, a diverse array of products on the market diverse. Let's stop this thing. It's actually that dumb. And now I think I actually got to laugh out loud dumb with this report from the Associated Press that Scott shared with me. Although I think he sent me a Blue Sky comment on the thing. I'm not sure. I'll have to look that up. But I put away the article and said, war heroes and military firsts are among the 26,000 images flagged for removal in Pentagon's DEI purge. That does not give the game away. I like that headline. It doesn't tell the joke right up front. Thank you. It saves it for later. And the piece is illustrated by one of, a collection of 5 photographs that I guess have been targeted for elimination from something. And the first one is the perfectly innocuous, they're all innocuous, perfectly innocuous looking photo provided by the U.S. Marine Corps of PFC Cristina Fuentes Montenegro, preparing, as the caption tells us, to hike to her platoon's defensive position during patrol week of infantry training battalion near Camp Geiger, is it Geiger, like the counter, North Carolina, October 31st, 2013. Why? What's the big deal? One of the first women to complete Marine infantry training, I guess. And so this is a photo collection for a museum of the armed forces of some sort, I guess maintained at the Pentagon, just sort of, the history of the various branches of the armed forces. This happened. It's history. And remember, it's very important to preserve history. We can't tear down statues of Confederates because history. But if history has DEI in it, then it's not history. So what's happening here, and what's so laugh out loud funny about this? Well, you may know already. Tara Kopp, Lolita C. Belder, and Kevin Vineys. It looks like Vineys, but Vineys. They already know because they wrote the story. References, are you ready to this? References to a World War II Medal of Honor recipient, the aircraft that dropped an atomic bomb on Japan, and the first women to pass Marine infantry training are among the tens of thousands of photos and online posts marked for deletion as the Defense Department works to purge diversity, equity, and inclusion content, according to a database obtained by the Associated Press. And there, too, the problem. They're doing it by database. And these kids who are running the thing don't really know what any of these things are. But wait till you find out how they made it onto the list. The database, which was confirmed by U.S. officials and published by AP, includes more than 26,000 images that have been flagged for removal across every military branch. It's not even clear what they're doing with these images. Like, if they were posters in an exhibit in a museum, which is, I guess, what I thought that they were before reading the article, I could sort of understand, well, how do you eliminate that? I guess we've seen them cover up posters like, what did we see? Was it one of the in USAID? Or was it one of the intelligence services where they had something about a memorial of sorts to people who had been killed in service, and that they were covered up? The posters were just covered up in brown paper while they were still on the wall, and then later uncovered. But I forget exactly what the details of that were, but I recall reading that story. But I guess these are just archived pictures that are available for use if they need to prepare a report about something, or they want to put a museum collection together, or whatever. And now they're just not allowed to use them, and maybe they have to get rid of them. So the database has more than 26,000 images in it, but the eventual total could be much higher. Now, what's going on here? One official, who spoke on condition of anonymity to provide details that have not been made public, said the purge could delete as many as 100,000 images or posts in total when considering social media pages and other websites that are also being culled for DEI content. The official said it's not clear if the database has been finalized. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth had given the military until Wednesday, all of those 3 days of this week, to remove content that highlights diversity efforts in its ranks following President Donald Trump's executive order ending those programs across the federal government. And they are, of course, being overzealous. It's one thing for the president to say, and it's wrong, but it's one thing for the president to say, I don't like this diversity DEI stuff. No more programs aimed at recruiting minorities specifically to the military. You can recruit, but there should be no focus on anybody's race when you're recruiting them. And that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, although it would still be pretty dumb because, you know, it makes good sense to be doing what they were doing and working on inclusion for various reasons. They don't agree. That's one thing. It's just so long as they're not discriminating against anybody who wants to join and serve. I mean, they will be because they're racists. But it would have been, that could have been an okay outcome. But instead, they're reading this stuff like, well, no DEI, so that means no diversity. So that it's being interpreted. If there's a picture of a black soldier, delete it. What are you talking about? It's just a picture of a soldier. He is a soldier. He is black. They're two different things. What's your effing problem? But that's how they're interpreting stuff like this. Here's some pictures of women. Get rid of them. That's not DEI. It's just a documentation of who's in the military. And I guess the application of, well, we shouldn't have this big display about who are the women firsts and who are the first black troops and all. Yeah, I mean, you should, but in their view, you shouldn't. And that would be, I guess, a decent reading of the program. But the idea of like, let's get rid of every picture of somebody who isn't Trump himself, or I don't know, a WASP, or this guy's Italian. I don't know. We don't know what they're doing. But we know this part. The vast majority of the Pentagon purge targets women and minorities, including notable milestones made in the military. And it also removes a large number of posts that mention various commemorative months, such as those for Black and Hispanic people, and women. Can't have months. That's terrible. But a review of the database also underscores the confusion that has swirled among agencies about what to remove following Trump's order. In some cases, photos seem to be flagged for removal simply because their file included the word, you'll never believe it. Everyone knows it. Has everyone guessed it? Does everyone remember the name of the famous aircraft? B-29 bomber, was it, that dropped the atomic bomb on Hiroshima? Or some people say Hiroshima. I'm not certain how the Japanese say it, but probably some of you are aware of it. Anyway, name of the plane? Yeah. Now you're beginning to get it. This really was like laugh out loud when I read this yesterday. They've eliminated the photos of the Enola Gay because gay. The plane was gay, everybody. We can't have gay planes included in it. Oh my God, it's the person's name. And not only that, we mentioned up at the top of the story that they eliminated reference to and photographs of a, how did they put it? A World War II Medal of Honor recipient. Surname? Gay. I guess so. So, I mean, it's getting down to this. And what's amazing is there's nobody who can even look at that. Like, to write this article, you see the list, you see what's being eliminated, you say, oh my God, right away I can tell you that's ridiculous and a huge mistake. Not dodgy. They don't, I'm sure the 19-year-old has no idea what Enola Gay means or what it is, but that's where we are. So here we are saying, I'll read you the article, the way they put it. In some cases, the photos seem to be flagged for removal simply because the file included the word gay, including service members with that last name, and an image of the B-29 aircraft Enola Gay, as previously mentioned. You know, that's kind of dumb, to say the least. Several photos of an Army Corps of Engineers dredging project in California were marked for deletion. Anybody know why? Apparently because a local engineer in the photo had the last name Gay. And a photo of Army Corps biologists was on the list, seemingly because it mentioned that they were recording data about their fish. About fish, it wasn't their fish necessarily, but fish in general. Why? Fish! Don't you see? They're including the fish. No, that isn't it, actually. I mean, I could believe that. Fish, they're not in the military. That's crazy. Now, they were recording data about fish that included their weight, size, hatchery, and gender. It's gender. We can't have any information about the gender of fish. They were recording the gender of fish. No, you weren't. Not according to the official history anymore. In addition, some photos of the Tuskegee Airmen, the nation's first black military pilots who served in a segregated World War II unit. You'd think they'd be proud of having them segregated, but no. That's on the database too, but those may likely be protected due to historical content, unlike the Enola Gay, which is only gay, I guess. I don't know. It's all historical content. The Air Force briefly removed new recruit training courses that included videos of the Tuskegee Airmen soon after Trump's order. That drew the White House's ire over malicious compliance. And the Air Force quickly reversed the removal. Just following orders, sir. Many of the images listed in the database have already been removed. Others were still visible on Thursday, and it's not clear if they'll be taken down at some point or be allowed to stay, including images with historical significance like the Tuskegee Airmen. Asked about the database, Pentagon spokesman, John Ulyott, is that right? Ullyot, said in a statement, "My name is Ulyott, and no one knows how to pronounce it. We are pleased by the rapid compliance across the department with the directive removing DEI content from all platforms. In the rare cases that content is removed that is out of the clearly outlined scope of the directive, we instruct components accordingly." To put them back, I assume. All right. He noted that Hegseth has declared that, quote, DEI is dead, unquote, and that efforts to put one group ahead of another through DEI programs, which isn't what they do, erodes camaraderie and threatens mission execution. No, it doesn't. Some images, they tell us, aren't gone. In some cases, the removal was partial. The main page in a post titled Women's History Month, All-Female Crew Supports Warfighters, was removed. But at least one of the photos in that collection about an all-female C-17 crew could still be accessed. Ooh, I'm telling. A shot from the Army Corps of Engineers titled Engineering Pioneer, remembered during Black History Month, deleted. Other photos flagged in the database but still visible Thursday included images of World War II women air service pilots and one of U.S. Air Force Colonel Janine Leavitt, the country's first female fighter pilot. Also still visible is an image of then PFC Cristina Fuentes Montenegro becoming one of the first of 3 women to graduate from the Marine Corps Infantry Training Battalion, and an image of Marine Corps World War II Medal of Honor recipient PFC Harold Gonsalves. It's unclear why some of those images were moved, such as a Marine Corps photo titled Deadlift Contenders Raise the Bar Pound by Pound. Why is that on the list? Actually, I don't know if I have a guess for that one. Raise the bar. Raise the... no, I'm not certain what that would be. Also, I guess on the list, National Guard website image called Minnesota Brothers Reunite in Kuwait. Brothers? I don't know. I have no idea. Why the database? The database of the 26,000 images was created to conform with federal archival laws, so if the services are queried in the future, they can show how they are complying with the law, the U.S. official said, but it may be difficult to ensure that the content was archived because the responsibility to ensure each image was preserved was the responsibility of each individual unit. So there you go. And here is a way to thumb through the database, 2,649 pages of archival photos marked for deletion. Let's see, just at random, let's go to page 12 and look in the middle here. Let's see what they have. Black History Month annual prayer breakfast. Got to get rid of that, even though it's prayer. Why do they hate religion? Freedom of religion. All right. 20th annual gospel sing raises voices. Gospel, everybody knows that's black. There could be any... White people don't care about the gospels. Oh, I see gospel music. Wow. DSS holds Black History Month event, honors Montford Point Marines. Can't honor Marines. Black History Month annual prayer breakfast, again. A little run just for fun. I'm not certain what that is, although there's a URL. This is interesting. A little run just for fun. It is 2 people, a woman and a young girl, like family member, in turkey costumes. Turkey is another country, so that's diversity. No, the bird. Turkey costumes for like one of those turkey trot 10K. It says on it in 2012. So is it a female soldier and her daughter? They're both white, if you think that's what it is. The U.S. Marine Corps photo by Lance Corporal Paris Capers. Fredericksburg native Corey Hayden, H-E-D-E-N, and her daughter Lois, 9, came to the trot in style at the 28th Marine Corps Marathon Turkey Trot held aboard Marine Corps Base Quantico on November 17th. First and second place winners from each age and gender category, there you go, received frozen turkeys and pumpkin pies, respectively. That is the answer. The word gender, which is a real thing, and which, by the way, the big push is on, we gotta stop the transgender stuff because men are competing in women's sports, which is to say that they want them separated by gender, which is what has happened here. They have separated the competition in the 10K turkey trot by gender, and nonetheless have targeted this thing for deletion because it used the word gender, which is amazing because if we eliminate the word gender from everything because DEI, then ta-da, we win. We can't enforce or even talk about the existence of Donald Trump's policy of discriminating against the transgender community because it has the word gender in it. And so there we are. We've solved the problem. Logic wins every time. All right. Well, that's pretty interesting. And I really did, like, at home, it's bad news, but I guffawed. I completely lost it when I read that they were getting rid of the pictures of the Enola Gay. Gay! I don't know. That was the dumbest thing I ever read in my life. But I live in America now, and that will be surpassed probably before this program is over. Now, let's see. A couple other items that have come up. Oh, look at this. Yes, here's it. Hey, you all know that I have from time to time gotten notes from my mom during the show. Now I'm getting notes from my dad during the show. Hi, Dad. How you doing? Must be driving around and enjoying the morning and got the show on how, unless you were listening from the other day, but that happens too. Have I say yes? I have seen the recent articles claiming that Trump is a Russian asset, and that's been of some interest. I think, yeah, they're a little shaky, some of these things, although it's certainly been reported for years that the story of Trump being recruited during his 1987 foray to Moscow, I've definitely heard before. There's new details coming up, the ones that say that he had a code name, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, I'll try and keep up on this one. And I've got a name to Google here, and we can give that some time in the near future. Anyway, we've gotten ourselves to the first break before getting through anything else, but I don't know. The Enola Gay story was just so ridiculous. I felt like I needed to spend some time on it. And if you haven't heard that story, maybe it made you cry. I don't know. Maybe it made you laugh out loud, though, to hear or to guess and to listen to the build up to finally announcing, getting rid of all pictures and references to the Enola Gay because my history is gay, as it turns out. So turning all the history gay. I understand that I missed the whole speech, of course, but I understand that one of the stupid excerpts that made it to everybody's eyeballs was Trump claiming that thanks to the DOGE boys, they had saved $8 million that was being misspent on turning mice transgender. And as it turns out, is it transgenic? Is that the word for genetically modified? Yeah. Whoops.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Coast, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Where to go next? Well, it could be anywhere. This one is relatively new, also making the rounds, of course, online and social media, so maybe you've heard something about it. But it seems, we haven't quite gotten to the bottom of it yet, but let me see. Well, we'll go with the HuffPost's reporting of this, although I do have a local paper's version of it. It's more boring, less pointed, vague in terms of laying blame for the thing. And let's just get right to it, because the HuffPost likes to stick it to people when they cut right to the point and say, yeah, we know what's going on here. We're okay with speculating, and I'm glad that they do. Arthur Delaney wrote this piece. This is real interesting. You will have heard. Well, I don't want to spoil it yet, but all right. We'll mention background when we get around to it. Trump administration forces Maine, the state, Maine parents to visit Social Security offices to register newborns. What exactly do you mean by that? Subheader tells us the Social Security Administration has canceled contracts that allowed Maine parents, and really allowed everybody all over in every state, but for some reason it was canceled in Maine. And then I did see that there was maybe some indication that a few other states may also have had the same thing happen, but it's not entirely confirmed. But it's leaving everybody scratching their heads why Maine, and you may already have a guess. But these contracts allowed Maine parents to sign up newborns for Social Security numbers at the hospital. If you've had kids in the last, 30 to 40 years, you've probably participated in this program. Well, you'll get the gist. For decades, new parents across the United States have been able to check a box on hospital forms in order to request Social Security numbers for their newborns. That's no longer the case in Maine, for some strange reason, where parents will now have to visit a Social Security field office, which, DOGE probably closed, thanks to a shocking move by President Donald Trump's administration. Not only have they probably closed the office, there probably aren't that many in Maine. And as you know, even if they had 50 of them in Maine, you can't get there from here. So it was never going to work out. But that's why it was so important to allow people to do this at the hospital. A spokesperson for the Maine Department of Health and Human Services told HuffPost on Thursday that the Social Security Administration said it had canceled 2 contracts with Maine's Vital Statistics program that supports Social Security's electronic enumeration at birth program. They have an acronym and everything, EAB, an abbreviation anyway. As a result of SSA's contract termination, effective immediately, Maine hospitals are no longer able to enroll newborns into Social Security at the time of birth, so parents will now need to visit their local Social Security office to apply in person for their child's Social Security number, the Maine DHHS spokesperson said in an email. And if there's one thing that every newborn parent has in spades, it's spare time to wait at a government office. It's going to mean people, they'll get the numbers eventually, but somebody's going to have to, suffer a pain in the ass to do this, where it used to be just check a box and everything will be taken care of. Got to get rid of that in America. We can't have that kind of convenience. No justification has been given for the change, which was first reported by the Portland Press-Herald. That's the report I've got here. The Social Security Administration has not responded to multiple requests for comment. He didn't check the box. The White House declined to comment, referring questions to the Social Security Administration. So they were interested in dodging it, I guess. It's likely that the contracts were canceled at the direction of Elon Musk's DOGE service, which has ripped through the federal government in search of savings. Leland Dudek, and this is a guy, I believe we called his name once when he first came up, but I think somewhere buried in pocket is a story that, if I remember correctly, I forget whose work it was, but very early called out by one of the independent news sources out there, and then picked up by the mainstream news, and of course failing to credit the original reporter for it. We'll see if I can find that story, but calling out that Leland Dudek is a Social Security Administration employee who basically is like, the Quisling guy. He decided that he was going to suck up to the DOGE troops when they got there and help them out. And I'll be your guide through the Social Security Administration and tell you who to hang as a traitor. And apparently this might be one of his initiatives. Leland Dudek, the acting commissioner of the Social Security Administration, recently told senior agency staff this week that they had to let DOGE run amok. I don't know whether he used the word amok or not, but apparently it was his instruction. I'll be your man on the inside that will open the doors for you and let you ruin the place, in the interest of saving it, of course. DOGE people are learning, and they will make mistakes, but we have to let them see what is going on at SSA, Dudek told the group, according to notes of the meeting obtained by the Washington Post. I am relying on longtime career people to inform my work, but I am receiving decisions that are made without my input. I have to effectuate those decisions. Dudek, as it turns out, previously announced the SSA would undergo a massive reorganization with significant job cuts. Martin O'Malley, who led the agency under former President Joe Biden, told HuffPost this week that the cuts to the agency could cause it to miss benefit payments to millions of people at some point. More than 50 million seniors rely on Social Security's retirement insurance program. And I guess the first Wednesday has passed. So second Wednesday comes up next week. People will we'll be looking once again to see if people are getting their checks properly and on time. Eventually, this thing will break down, says Martin O'Malley. But that's not what we're here for. The Social Security Administration rolled out the enumeration at birth program in the late 1980s, allowing parents only to check a box on state birth forms at the hospital to get their newborn a Social Security number. The program has been available in all 50 states since 1997, and 99% of babies now get their Social Security numbers that way, according to the Social Security Administration. Parents typically need Social Security numbers for their children in order to obtain medical coverage, open a bank account, or obtain government services. A pamphlet on the Social Security Administration's website explains the simple process. Hopefully it doesn't say gender in there anywhere, like, enter your child's name and gender. We got to get rid of the Social Security Administration. When you complete the application for your baby's birth certificate, you will be asked whether you want to apply for an SSN for your baby. The pamphlet said if you say yes, you will be asked to provide both parents' SSNs. If you don't know both parents' SSN, Social Security number, in case you've lost track here, you can still apply for your child's SSN. Since taking office in January, Trump has empowered Musk, the world's richest man, to try to slash federal bureaucracies and fire workers. Musk's team has targeted government contracts that Musk has described as wasteful. It's not clear if Musk's young, dodgy deputies thought the SSA contracts with Maine's government were wasteful, or if they were canceled by accident. Musk has admitted making mistakes. The dodgy website has repeatedly posted incorrect information about money saved from canceled contracts. The dodgy, this is sort of a catch-all article, isn't it? It's good. It's good to catch up on these things. The dodgy, quote, wall of receipts says it canceled 6 enumeration at birth contracts between the Social Security Administration and 5 states, plus the Northern Mariana Islands, a U.S. territory in the Pacific Ocean. Maine does not appear to be on the list, however. So that's interesting all by itself, and a mistake all by itself. The dodgy website suggests Musk's team has been trying to cancel the contracts partially, only to the extent that they result in the collection of race and ethnicity information. Haha, see? Not gender? Amazing. Which dodgy considers to be an example of DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so now it's, if you exist as a black person or you have a race, we can't know about it or talk about it because DEI. And it's not, we're not giving you a job automatically because of your race. We're not giving you extra benefits at birth. We're not, nothing. We aren't firing a white baby and replacing them with a black baby. It just doesn't work like that. All we're doing is asking, who are you? What are you about? Don't collect that information. That could be used to include somebody in something. This is how dumb this whole thing is. It's interesting, though, that they didn't ping on gender in this for some strange reason. This is the good kind of gender. I mean, so's the other one from before, but anyway. The form reflecting the termination of an enumeration contract in Arizona, for instance. So Arizona, you're up against this too. Partial termination of the race and ethnicity, or RE, records requirement. The dodgy site says only the DEI values are included in the dollar amount saved. Sure, whatever. So they're trying to say they know how much money is being saved by not collecting information on race. I doubt very much that they're able to do that calculation. Trump has also feuded with, and here's where this comes in, feuded with Maine's governor for refusing to play along with Trump's directive to disallow transgender athletes in girls' sports. Maine Governor Janet Mills, a Democrat, you'll remember this, told Trump she would see you in court over the girls' sports directive during a recent meeting between governors and the president in Washington, D.C. Trump then threatened to withhold all federal funding from Maine. So it's possible that they didn't even make the list initially, but that direction was given by Trump. I want you to find something that we can use to screw Maine over. And of course, the natalists have chosen to immediately punish the parents of newborn children. So that's highly targeted and super American, and boy, won't that make America great again. I don't know. We don't know what the reason is. They haven't said so on the record, but that's as good a guess as any, given the odd decision, one, to target 5 states, but only partially, but then target the entirety of the program in Maine and then not put them on the list. But every part of this story is effed up at some level. And I don't know. I thought I'd add that to the collection heading into the weekend. Also on other people's minds, we mentioned that they did get around to, did we mention it? Because they got around to censuring Al Green yesterday. And I think we got word of that before the program ended. But I know we were just speculating on whether or not they would do that by the beginning of the program. But that has come to pass. And unfortunately, as I guess we expected to be the case, they, Republicans offered a resolution of censure because he stood up during the president's speech and yelled at him, which Republicans have done at every speech since Obama, I guess, to every Democratic president, and they continue to do every time. They do it during regular debate on bills on the floor of the House of Representatives. They were doing it the other night, breaking the rules, as it turns out. We'll discuss exactly how. But nobody ever gets punished for it. But this time they decided they were going to do something about it and punish Al Green. And as expected, they did not need any Democratic votes to go ahead and get this censure done. The Republicans are in the majority, and they could put that majority together and pass a censure resolution. But 10 Democrats decided that they, I guess, would benefit in some fashion by joining the Republicans and adding their numbers to the totals. And I know that there was a lot of pushback on the pushback as people listed the names of the Democrats who crossed the aisle to do this. And, the pushback being, well, some of these people, maybe all of them even, serve in red districts, very marginal districts. They flipped a red seat, and they need to be able to show that they're, depending on what, they need to be able to show that they're Republican light, independent from the leadership, pick your own spin on it. But then, of course, most people also added quickly after, people will forget about it. No one's paying attention to it. It doesn't even matter. They could have passed it anyway. They weren't crucial to its passage, et cetera, et cetera. But those are all also reasons why you shouldn't even bother joining the Republican team on this. And I know that, no, we still vote with Democrats 99% of the time. Yeah, I know. And you're worried about that percentage, and you need to be able to show, you're looking for a freebie vote that doesn't make a difference one way or the other in something passing, but that can be used to demonstrate independence from leadership or the Democrats writ large, whatever that might mean. But honestly, it's true. No one is going to remember this vote. Certainly no swing voters who are like, well, I kind of prefer Republicans on the economy, say, which is a disaster, or egg prices, or whatever it is you're thinking. But I'll go along with this one because she's sensible. He's sensible. He's middle of the road. He voted against Nancy Pelosi once, 20 years ago. They don't remember that stuff. The people who remember the vote on Al Green will be angry base Democrats who are like, screw that one. This person stabbed the party and one of their colleagues in the back when they really didn't have to. And, that's the way I view it. I know there's arguments to be made either way, but certainly if you're relying on the argument, then it won't matter anyway. Well, if it doesn't matter, then don't join the Republicans in this, because that has given rise to any number of articles about the situation. To the extent that anybody who isn't tuned into politics pays attention to this story, they just happen to see it in the newspaper on their way to the sports section, it will now say that he was censured in a bipartisan effort. And that's what they were looking for out of you 10 people who crossed over. It wasn't a matter of, well, let's make sure that people in this reddish swing district know I'm independent, because they're not looking. But what they get the story everywhere else in non-swing districts is that this was a bipartisan effort, so that must mean Republicans were right, thanks to the participation of 10 Democrats. So among other people who I discussed it with online, our friend Darwin sent us this screenshot of the 10 names and commenting along the way, with friends like these, 10 Democrats joined with Republicans to censure Al Green for Trump's speech protest, or the Trump speech protest. Remember their names, and you might as well. Some of them are less surprising than others, but others not so much. Let's see. Among them, Ami Bera of California, Ed Case of Hawaii. Hawaiian Democrats are a very weird bunch sometimes. And as I recall, Ed Case is a little borderline with his what would we say? His loyalties. If I'm thinking of the right guy, and I think I am in this, but they also produce Tulsi Gabbard, Hawaii. But on the other hand, they've done very well in the past too with some good solid Democrats. Yes. Jim Costa of California, Laura Gillen of New York, Jim Himes of Connecticut. Greg, you'll have to stop by and see if you can convince Jim Himes to change his mind on that one. Too late, of course. Chrissy Houlihan of Pennsylvania, Marcy Kaptur of Ohio, which that too was a little bit of a surprise, but she's pretty. I don't know if anybody can move Marcy Kaptur, to be honest with you, but okay. That was a little bit of a surprise. Not a surprise, maybe, but still a mistake. Jared Moskowitz of Florida, and Tom Suozzi of New York, which is also kind of like, really? Did you really think you needed to hold on to? I know it's a swingy district, and we once had George Santos from there, but please, honestly, no one is paying attention to that in New York. And I have my doubts about whether they're paying attention to it very much in Washington State, where finger on the pulse of real America, genius of the swing district theory, Marie Glusenkamp Perez of Washington won a lot of plaudits. To be fair, winning a fairly red-leaning district, in fact, red, I think, through and through the district, and winning it twice, that's great. But, yeah, again, to me, you won it twice without censuring Al Green. What makes you think it's going to make a big difference in round 3 in 2 years from now? I don't know. But, I hesitate to say, well, I know what's best for you in your district or anything like that. But I also think that you probably could have gotten away with it. The whole thing is bullshit, and I'm not voting for it. No. You could have asked Greg.
That's
exactly.
Bullshit.
Right, and he would have told you. Even if you didn't understand what was underneath that horn, you would have known, this is not going to help me get elected. It's not a part of my effort to reach across the aisle in Washington. And if you think it is, I suggest you rethink it. I mean, I'm not going to throw you out of the party, and I'm going to take your vote wherever we can get it. But, yeah, that didn't strike me as super sophisticated or smart, to be honest. But what do I know? In fact, though, if you don't want to listen to me, you could listen to the better collected, perhaps, thoughts from John Storr at the editorial board, right? And do I have his name correct? Yes. Okay. I'm glad I remembered it offhand. He had some comments about it. In fact, he had some comments about something yesterday that I don't think I had time to get to. But this one is, is this the, in fact, this is the one that I had parked earlier and didn't read yesterday. So maybe what I can do here while I have the opportunity is open up his feed and see what it was. He was talking about the State of the Union thing earlier today. Here it is. Hasn't been 3 whole days yet since the State of the Union, which it wasn't, of course. And miraculously, it's already being forgotten. I figured I wouldn't write about it at all, but now I find that I must, not because of anything Trump did, but because what 10 House Democrats did, which is to say, as he puts it, acting like goddamn fools. Before I go on, I have to explain something about the nature of public opinion, and this is really what it's about to me. And by the time I'm done, I hope you'll understand why these 10 Democrats and while they probably meant well, are actually undermining their party's infant effort to mount meaningful opposition to Trump. This is a moment where sticking together as a team makes not only the most sense, but is imperative. And that's why, for me, this was more reminiscent of the fairly disastrous Rahm Emanuel era policy of allowing Democrats to freelance it on motions to recommit, and it ended up providing Republicans with a lot of cover and angering the base at a time when, yeah, I know they were trying to reach across the aisle, but you're supposed to reach across the aisle once you've solidified your own base. You can't say, screw the base, I'm reaching across the aisle. You'll never get as many people from across the aisle as you'll lose from the base. I mean, that I think needs to be taken into consideration, and it's just generally not for some reason. Before I go on, I have to explain something about the nature of public opinion. He says, by the time I'm done, I hope you'll understand why these Dems, while they probably meant well, are actually undermining their party's infant effort to mount meaningful opposition to Trump. First, most people don't come to their own conclusions about politics. You see what he means here in a second. Their opinions are not theirs. No, not really. They're someone else's. I know that sounds a bit insulting, I can agree, like you don't have a brain or something, but I don't intend to be insulting. Too late. I'm merely acknowledging a reality, which is that for normal people who do not work in the media, politics happens in the background of their lives, and by the time they have a chance to focus on it, it's been mediated one way or another by people like me, and that's certainly possible. So the opinions that normal people have are usually a variation of the opinions that elites, or I would say so-called elites, have, whether those elites are people in the media like me or people who have so much money that they can spend all their time thinking about ways to get normal people like you to agree with them. In short, whatever the elites think is usually what normal people think, and to be sure, there's lots of fighting and arguments and disagreement, but there are individuals and whole factions on the margins of mainstream discourse, but more or less, the elite consensus is the consensus. The problem with respect to the Democrats, especially in the wake of a presidential election in which theirs was the losing party, is that their instincts run against the grain of what they should be doing to shape public opinion against the party and the president that defeated them. Their instincts are to say to themselves, well, the critics of the Democratic Party must have a point on account of the Democratic Party having been defeated. So it makes sense to give voice to those critics for the purpose of winning over people who voted against us. In other words, their instinct is to moderate or move to the center or compromise, all in quotes here, in order to appeal to that elusive undecided voter. This instinct, however, is counter to pretty much everything. Why? Because of the nature of public opinion. Normal people do not come to their own opinions on their own, not really. They adopt the opinions of elites. I see the point. I don't know if I would agree fully necessarily, or I understand that it will make people upset and angry to have that receive full agreement, but it's pretty close for most people. Not the political junkies like you and me listening to programs like this. So when one group says the Dems are the problem, and another group says, well, yes, some of us are indeed the problem, and a third group, let's call them the centrist pundits, say both sides are the problem. Well, guess what the consensus is going to be? The consensus, the modal reality there is people come to the conclusion that the Dems are the problem. One side says Democrats, one side says, yeah, Democrats, and another says, well, maybe both parties. You know where the mode lies there, right? Which brings me to those 10 House Democrats. Yesterday, they voted alongside the entire Republican conference to censure Texas Congressman Al Green for getting into good trouble, as we call it, on Tuesday's State of the Union, non-State of the Union address. At the beginning of Trump's speech, Green stood up and shouted, and he kept shouting, until, according to the AP, the vice president motioned with his thumb to the House Speaker to throw Green out. After that, he said, Green said he'd face any punishment because Trump was saying he had a mandate, and I was making it clear that he had no mandate to cut Medicaid. It's worth it to let people know that there are some of us who are going to stand up against this president. And he literally did stand up. The AP had another telling detail. Rarely has a lawmaker been so swiftly and severely disciplined for improper behavior. That's because Al Green is black, almost certainly, says John. And 10 non-black members of his party chose to agree with the GOP, which is to say they chose to sabotage one of their own while sending the message to people who might otherwise support them that they shouldn't bother. And then he provides the list of who they are, and you know by now who they were. Personally, I think the entire Democratic caucus in the House and the Senate should have boycotted the whole address. Their nominee, Kamala Harris, ran for president on the idea that Trump was a menace to democracy, the Constitution, and the rule of law. And if they agree with her, they would not have given the impression with their presence on Tuesday that everything's going to be fine. Indeed, some Democrats did not attend the speech. They believed what they said. If they are hoping, and I think they are hoping, to convince moderate constituents that they are one of the good Democrats, ones worth voting for and keeping in office, their presence at the speech should have been enough. They did not need to censure Green to accomplish that, but they did accomplish two other things, and one of them is pissing off Democratic voters. Like the non-State of the Union speech, the vote to censure Green will be forgotten in short order by pretty much everyone except everyone who's looking at the party for meaningful opposition to Trump. Come the midterms, undecided voters aren't going to remember the vote. Democrats, however, will. The other thing is worse. That's undermining the opposition effort by deepening the already powerful national consensus against the Democrats by agreeing with Republicans and saying, yeah, some of us Democrats really are the problem, especially the black ones. How can anyone believe that the Democrats will stand united against tyranny when some of them so easily throw one of their own away? These 10 House Democrats believe they're going to get something for their betrayal of Al Green. At the very least, a degree of goodwill from their constituents. In fact, all they're going to get is more hatred and fury, not only from outside their party, but now from the inside, too. So I think that's definitely worth consideration. I'm sure that there are people who will say, no, my theory on how to win these red districts is different. And in some of those districts, they are right. As we were talking about Slotkin's ideas about what works in Michigan and what works everywhere just yesterday. But this is another corollary to that. All right, coming up against break number 2 here at the top of the hour, and starting to fall behind in the laundry list of items we need to bring to your attention. But you know how things go on this show on a Friday or any other day for that matter. Yeah, all right. And I'm going to look over this other commentary, this other thread from John, and see whether it belongs to or deserves to get it certainly deserves it. But whether we're going to try to shoehorn it in here or move on from there to the various other topics socked away in pocket for your edification prior to another, I'm sure, super crazy weekend. All right, stay tuned and we'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think I almost mispronounced my own show once again. All right, well, I'm drowning in the flood of stories. I did have reason to read you the other thread, also from John Storr. This one from yesterday. I had it all queued up. I wanted to see if I could include it yesterday. I didn't get a chance to do it. Let's do it now. It's not a bad segue. Apparently, he's been suffering from a cold lately, and that makes prominent mention at the beginning of this thing. As he says, as I lie in bed overcoming whatever demon hell kind of cold I have. Good luck with that one. Hope it's not anything worse than that. I have been thinking about what it means for a president to dismantle the United States government at the rate that Donald Trump is, and I keep coming back to what a professor at the University of Texas at Austin said. Now, before I get on to that, here, I guess, I'll make reference back to the storyline that my dad was suggesting to me earlier, and that others of you have suggested, the question of whether or not Trump is, in fact, a Russian asset of some kind, whether knowingly or unknowingly. And I mean, generally speaking, if you're worried about what Trump is doing, it's unknowingly, because that's the way he does things. I think he ties his shoes and eats breakfast and goes to the bathroom unknowingly. He's just sort of making his way through existence without any thought given to anything. But the question of what he's doing and why I'm not sure it actually matters exactly why he's so subservient to Putin and why he seems to be doing his bidding at all times. But, as other people have put it, if you were trying to make it look like you were completely under Putin's sway, what would you do differently from what he's actually doing now? And I don't know that there's a great deal of difference between attempting, what it would look like if he was trying to do it specifically, and he really definitely actually was a recruited asset or just behaving like one. I don't know if it makes a difference to the rest of us here. And I thought this thread kind of helped illustrate some of that. As he says here, he couldn't help thinking in the wake of all of this stuff that's going on, what this professor in Texas had said. And who's the professor? Josh Busby is the name of the guy. And he's what he's done here is he's went back and grabbed, I guess he must have made this comment on Blue Sky because it's right here in front of me. Josh Busby saying, I can't think of a faster way to undermine the country than simultaneously firing government workers, cutting scientific research, rolling back protections on public health and environment, and cutting essential services. It's like the U.S. was defeated in a war and is being occupied by a hostile enemy. That is a very pointed way of putting it. And in fact, I saw that comment the other day. I'm glad John has picked back up on it here. And then he continues, every day since Busby posted this remark seems to have deepened the wisdom of it. And it's about a week old, this comment. This administration said last night, this is now 2 nights ago, that it would cut in half the 90,000 people who work at the IRS, which, yay, IRS, I don't have to pay my taxes now. Yeah. But it also is happening right in the middle of tax season, which means also you're likely to have to wait longer for your refund, which is the part of taxes that people actually kind of get excited. At least I'll get the tax refund. I know it's not enough, but at least there'll be this big check or small check or something. And not everybody gets it, of course. But yeah, well, you're going to get the good part a lot slower and the bad part still due on April 15th. Sorry. Every day since he posted this remark, of course, it's gotten worse. The president is planning to issue an executive order falsely claiming the authority to shut down the U.S. Department of Education. We mentioned that one yesterday. This morning, it was reported that the administration would cut 80,000 jobs at the Veterans Affairs Administration. Trump and his advisors say they are getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. But even if that were the case, savings and efficiency wouldn't come at the expense of gutting whole agencies and departments that are necessary for a nation to be a nation. If we try taking a full accounting of what Trump has done, from federal funding freezes to canceling contracts to firing hundreds of thousands of public servants, it has the feel of something you'd expect to happen after a nation has been beaten, colonized, carved up, and sold off. There may be stronger evidence suggesting that we are a conquered country, but you'd be hard-pressed to find anything better than last week's meeting between Trump and Vladimir Zelensky. Instead of acting like the president of the United States, Trump acted like a puppet ruler assigned by the Kremlin to force Ukraine's president into accepting peace terms favorable only to Russian leader Vladimir Putin. How could we be conquered without firing a shot? The short answer is, quote, real Americans, coal miners, for instance, wanted it that way. Did they? How could we be conquered without firing a shot? Well, political union with Russia to own the globalists. Because the coal miners wanted it, I guess. To explain, John says, I'm going to dig into the archives for a long excerpt of a piece that I wrote more than a year ago when the Republicans, who controlled only the House at that time, were making the argument that Ukraine did not deserve continued American support in its fight against the invaders. They based that argument almost entirely on a decade's worth of Russian disinformation that had by then combined seamlessly with the right-wing media apparatus. In that piece, I try to explain that inside the real country that is called America, there is an imaginary country, a confederacy of the mind and spirit, a sub-nation, if you will, that is always in a state of war with America. I call this sub-nation Real America, all one word, because it's all inhabited by, quote, real Americans, whose goal in history has always been dominance and control of the United States. They want this so much that they are willing to force alliances with foreign enemies of the United States. That alliance began over 10 years ago when Donald Trump first rode his golden escalator, but it finally paid off. In 2024, in particular, Russian disinformation helped Trump And those Confederates win the election, and now he and the Confederates are paying Putin back by not only trying to bring Ukraine to heel, but also by reversing decades of U.S. foreign policy and dismantling the U.S. government from the inside out. It feels like the U.S. was defeated in a war and is being occupied by a hostile enemy, as Josh Busby wrote, and that's because, in a sense, it was. And here are some excerpts from that year-old piece that might help explain some of that. Donald Trump is the president of the, quote, the chosen people who live in this confederacy of the mind and spirit, a fake, quote, nation inside a real nation where democratic politics and liberal values such as universal liberty are now seen less as ideals than as perversions of God's will. Thanks a lot, Curtis Yarvin. And those chosen people believe that Donald Trump will return to the White House to rule the real America with as much fervor as they believe that Christ will return from heaven to rule the earth for 1,000 years. Well, next up, the enemy of their enemy is their friend. Of course, in this excerpt reads, it's due to their faith in God's plan for this confederacy of the mind and spirit that the chosen see nothing wrong with the leader of their, quote, country forging ties with foreign powers that are hostile to the real America. After all, they are a numerical minority these days. They need all the help they can get. The enemy of the enemy is their friend. The Russo Real American Alliance is next. Of course, we refer to that as political union with Russia, yada, yada. The result is an alliance that has no name, but should, so let's call it the Russo Real American Alliance. It's a mutually beneficial alignment between President of Russia, Vladimir Putin, and the President of Real America, Donald Trump, against the real America and Joe Biden, as well as against democracy and the rule-based international order. Seems to be more or less the case all across the board. Siding with Russia isn't treason in their formulation, it's patriotism. Isn't that interesting? The Confederacy of the Mind and Spirit, what some political scientists might call a sub-nation, has more in common politically and culturally with Russia than it does with the real nation, actual nation, in which it resides. Its inhabitants believe they are sovereign in all but name. Maybe that gives rise among the techier weirdos among this group to the network states idea that we've heard a little bit about in the past. They believe Trump is their legitimate president, even when at the time a year ago Donald Trump was not the president. That Trump has forged ties with Putin against the real America. I have to put that extra pause in it, not one word. And that he and some other Republicans might even be in Russian pay. Not treasonous, it's patriotic. Remember that Dana Rohrabacher thought that, and so did Kevin McCarthy at one point. So, worth thinking about, and then a link, in fact, to this older piece, which I guess we should open up and provide a link to as well. So I'll pocket that for you. But yeah, that's at a minimum, if you're not ready to move to the part about, oh yeah, he was a real Russian asset and has a code name and everything and is still being used as one. You could ask yourself, what's the difference? Maybe he's not a knowing asset, but it's very difficult to describe a serious difference between a clear asset working on behalf of Putin and what's happening now. That's one of the difficulties. In fact, here's another story that has grown out of Wired's terrific reporting on the DOGE efforts, and there are two in a row that I think I need to read for you here. One, keeping an eye on the clock here too. There's a million things that you really need to know going into the weekend, but this one follows, I think, pretty closely on this. Along with, remember a couple of weeks ago we read the story that one of the activities DOGE stupidly engaged in was sending an unencrypted open email to the White House about various of its efforts, including, I guess, some effort to weed people out and fire people in the intelligence services that ended up including unprotected names and contact information of people in the clandestine services. Whoops. A knock list that we suddenly decided to expose to who knows who, because we did it unencrypted and openly. Well, here's another big quote-unquote mistake that will cost the intelligence community. For some strange reason, they've followed up the first mistake with this second one. A sensitive complex housing a CIA facility ended up on GSA's list, of course, I'm sure generated by DOGE, GSA's list of U.S. properties for sale. And guess what? Their cover was blown in the process. Hooray! Plans to redevelop a Northern Virginia warehouse site, the subheader reads, have long been complicated by the area's worst kept secret, the presence of a CIA facility. The GSA put the site up for sale anyway. Isn't that cool? By the way, 4 names in the byline here. Dhruv Mehrotra. Sorry, apologies if I got it wrong. Tim Marchman. Apologies to you if I got it wrong too. Leah Feiger and Andrew Couts. I don't know. How would you pronounce Couts? Ask Andrew if you have any questions about it. If you have his number, go ahead. A now deleted list containing hundreds of U.S. government properties that the GSA plans to sell, although maybe they've withdrawn all those plans, includes most of, but I guess not all of, a sprawling, highly sensitive federal complex in Springfield, Virginia that also houses a secret CIA facility, Wired has learned. How did they learn it? Because the DOGE guys are terrible at operational security, I guess. The GSA's effort to sell hundreds of U.S. government properties, we talked about it, is part of a blunt reshaping of the federal government and its workforce led by Elon Musk's so-called Department of Government Efficiency, staffed in part by young engineers with no prior experience in government. DOGE's efforts have resulted in mass reductions in force, the effective shuttering of entirely independent agencies, and a flurry of lawsuits that seeks to mitigate DOGE's raising of the government over the past 6 weeks, which they're mostly losing, the DOGEs. The GSA published a list on Tuesday and then pulled it down the next day. Before the full list of 443 properties was removed, more than 120 properties had already been quietly scrubbed, including 14 buildings that did not appear to be listed in the inventory of owned and leased properties, a comprehensive public database of GSA holdings. And I guess you see the origins of this story now. There was an official list of government properties that we acknowledge are federal government properties, but apparently there was also a list of some 14 buildings. There was not a list. Not included on the list was 14 government buildings that we wink about government ownership of because the CIA is there. But we listed them for sale as government properties anyway, when officially most people were supposed to think they're not government properties. That was supposed to be a layer of protection for the intelligence services there. But to hell with all of that, because we don't understand anything. Most of these properties, aside from one identified only as Building A6810, were labeled as either Butler or Franconia. Franconia is the area of Springfield that they're in. According to public records, all of them are part of a large federal facility known as the Par Franconia Warehouse Complex, or the GSA warehouse, which sits fenced in by chain link topped with barbed wire at 6810 Loisdale Road in Springfield. That's how you get to Building A, 6810. Most of the buildings in the complex, which dates back to the early 1950s and is dominated by a 1 million square foot warehouse. So they got the exact number here, but you want 1,005,602 square foot warehouse, long used as a government supply depot, are believed to be used by various government agencies for mundane purposes. Right in the middle of the complex, though, next to the warehouse and catty-corner to what's listed as Transportation Security Administration Headquarters, is a U-shaped building long notorious for its alleged ties to the CIA. Obviously, someone did no research about the long and well-documented history of this property, says Jeff McKay, chair of the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors and a longtime advocate of redeveloping the complex, which is near a metro station and sits in a prosperous area. Normally, a site like this wouldn't be outed, so to speak, but everyone knows it's here except apparently the people who put this list together. You know, the neighborhood had kind of quietly agreed, yeah, that's kind of above our pay grade, CIA secret facility. Just one of the costs of living in the Washington, D.C. area, I guess. And though we'd love to redevelop this thing, there are forces more powerful than us at work here. But DOGE doesn't recognize any force more powerful than it, I guess. The CIA's use of the building located at 6801 Springfield Center Drive, not all of which can necessarily be observed from street level, ooh, sneaky, was first reported in 2012 by the Washington Business Journal, which in an article around the same time called the CIA's presence in the area perhaps the worst kept secret in Springfield. Okay. But also don't call it out. Anyway, that would be good advice. But it's not necessarily all DOGE's fault, I guess. The most specific description of its purpose, as the publication noted, can be found in the 2011 spy agency-focused nonfiction book, Fallout, the true story of the CIA's secret war on nuclear trafficking. And that's a good thing to have a war on. By Catherine Collins and Douglas France. Not F-R-A-N-C-E, but F-R-A-N-T-Z, friends, who write, while describing a clandestine operation, quote, there were 2 pick and lock specialists from the agency's secret facility in Springfield, Virginia. In a warehouse-like building there, the CIA trains a cadre of technical officers to bug offices, break into houses, and penetrate computer systems. Parenthetically noted here, whether it is currently used for these purposes is unknown. According to the Journal's reporting, Fairfax County leaders like McKay were frustrated because plans to redevelop the complex ran up against the existence of this facility. The entire challenge with redevelopment has been this entity, McKay tells Wired. This idea that you can sell everything around it and it'll be okay runs counter to all the intelligence information we've been given over the past couple of decades. Without divulging the specific details of the activities, the government has been very clear about the sensitivity of the property. Even a widely supported plan to relocate FBI headquarters to Springfield foundered due in part to the CIA presence. So, you know, it's been an issue before. That's an interesting note. While the FBI would not have raised security concerns, its relocation to the site would have raised logistical ones. And I love the logistical ones. Some government agencies, says McKay, said redevelopment was impossible. Others said the secret facility would have to be relocated at the expense of the incoming tenant, making it far more expensive than other potential sites. Since Tuesday, GSA sources have been wondering about the possible inclusion of CIA buildings on the list that was posted and then deleted. One source with knowledge of CIA operations, when asked about concerns that the GSA may have listed at least one of the agency's facilities as being for sale, immediately acknowledged the Springfield building. The building itself, which in the past in reporting has been described as being held by a private owner, does not appear to have been listed for sale, but due to its sensitivity, selling the buildings around it would raise much the same concerns. There have been rumors swirling that some of the buildings identified house classified CIA space, said one source at GSA, adding, the release of non-core properties was especially surprising as this nebulous language has not historically actually been used at GSA, non-core, something they made up for the purpose. As the Washington Business Journal reported in 2012, a real estate appraisal in the late 1990s listed the CIA as one of the complex's tenants. And CIA has a legit footprint all over the place too, so you could pass it off as something like that. But this reporting indicated that its presence there extends back at least 3 decades. It is nonetheless possible that the GSA does not know, at least officially, that the CIA has operated within the Springfield warehouse complex, a source at GSA tells Wired. In general, we have agencies that perform many critical law enforcement and national security functions, they say. We are not always aware of what type of operations are being conducted within tenant spaces. We build out operations to their specs and ensure their spaces are up to code. In my own personal experience, there are spaces in our buildings that not everyone knows about, not necessarily CIA specifically. I think it just shows how completely unorganized this bird shot of a list is, says McKay. But do we understand what the GSA is saying? In other words, this is why, logistically speaking, it would be dumb, impossible, implausible, impractical, impossible, something along those lines, for a private owner to house these things, unless, of course, it was successfully kept secret from the private owner, which is theoretically possible, but it's a lot easier if you just say, well, why don't we have the government own this property, and then we can wink, wink at GSA. Don't ask too many questions. You make sure the building is well maintained and up to code. Don't ask about what goes on in there. And that's not something they can always necessarily order a private owner to comply with. But they can, usually up until now, reliably, they've been able to force GSA as the owner manager to simply understand you're part of the federal government, so are they. You shouldn't be asking questions about what goes on in there. They're accountable to us through other channels. Just leave it. Not always going to be possible with a private owner. The CIA declined to comment. The GSA did not respond to Wired's request for comment. On Wednesday, GSA issued a statement acknowledging the feedback the agency has received and asserting that inclusion, don't use the word inclusion, on the originally published list did not mean a building would be up for sale immediately. We anticipate the list will be republished in the near future after we evaluate, I guess for the first time, this initial input, the statement said. Normally the operation would be, let's review it first and publish it post-review. This new idea, of course, is let's just throw out everything and see what needs to be deleted later. That doesn't work when it comes to keeping national security secrets, though, does it? Anyway, we anticipate that the list will be republished in the near future after we evaluate this initial input and determine how we can make it easier for stakeholders to understand the nuances of the assets listed. I am not saying it's CIA or not. A former intelligence analyst who worked at Langley for more than a decade tells Wired, but it's reckless that this information is out there at all. It speaks to the fact that these guys have no interest in even understanding government operations, which, is more or less as we have said it was all along. Okay, there's another Wired piece sitting alongside that in pocket that we may have a chance to sneak in before the break. A slightly different angle on DOGE's stupidity and what it means for the rest of the government. This time, a piece also from yesterday that didn't make it on the air. David Gilbert gets the byline on this piece entitled Social Security Workers Aren't Allowed to Read This Story. Always one of the most popular formulations of headlines, clickbait-wise. You're not allowed to... What they don't want you to know. Well, what is it? The new internet restrictions at the embattled SSA have cut off access to Wired, along with other general news websites like the Washington Post. Even the suck-ups at the Washington Post are getting cut off. Plus, of course, the New York Times. That communist rag. Apparently, at Social Security Administration, your computers, your internet access excludes any access to Wired, the New York Times, and the Washington Post. Because why should you be able to figure out what's happening in the world and do your job? Employees at the Social Security Administration, in addition to being fired left and right and being told that they can no longer automatically issue at birth Social Security numbers for people in Maine, were informed on Thursday morning that new rules forbid them from accessing general news websites, including those that have been at the forefront of the reporting on Elon Musk and DOGE. In an email reviewed by Wired somehow and addressed to all SSA employees from a mailing list called Internal Communications the agency informed employees that it was implementing additional restrictions to the categories of websites prohibited from government-furnished equipment. Effective today, March 6, 2025, the categories include online shopping. Like, you don't want people like, let's say, porn. I imagine that's on the list, but it's not added yesterday. Online shopping. Yeah, shouldn't be doing that, I guess. Unless, of course, you're buying something for the office, in which case, go screw yourself. You're also not allowed to do that. Plus, you'll never be able to make the purchase anyway because your government credit card has been seen its charge limit reduced to $1, which we've seen sort of across lots of government agencies. That's causing all sorts of problems everywhere. But you also won't be able to read general news and sports, which, okay, you probably shouldn't be reading about while you're at work. The headline read, Internet browsing from government equipment. The email did not specify which websites in particular were to be blocked. However, Wired has confirmed with two sources inside the SSA that Wired.com is no longer accessible today, although it was accessible previously. The sources also confirmed that websites for the Washington Post, the New York Times, and MSNBC were inaccessible. However, the sources were able to access other news websites, including Politico and Axios. Local news is blocked, according to one source at the SSA, speaking anonymously for that, of course. So if there's a local shooting or something, I won't be able to see. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and Patreon.com, Patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, Patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think at this point we probably can jump out of this wire. You get the sense, you get the idea of what's going on here. Wired itself blocked from access at the Social Security Administration, not government-wide, not yet anyway, but I guess that's probably coming soon. More detail about how they discovered this, who else might be blocked, and what the implications might be. Certainly welcome to review that on your own, and I'll provide you with the link. But definitely a couple other things that we want to get to before the show closes out. One, of course, would be to inform you that in addition to word that came earlier in the week that, oh, gee whiz, although we have definitely sort of kind of maybe almost promised that on March 4th, those tariffs against those terrible, evil people, Mexico and Canada, were to be imposed on March 4th after having been delayed by a month, which is just 2 weeks times 2, basically. But everything is in units of 2 weeks. They were going to come back. Sure, we gave them a reprieve in February when we said February 4th would be the date. Well, now it's going to be March 4th. March 4th has come and gone, and yes, the tariffs were imposed, but then all of a sudden, well, you say that it'll cost our automakers lots and lots of money if we do that. Okay, well, how about we suspend the tariffs for goods coming in from Canada for our automakers? Oh, and that'll cost people billions of dollars similarly from Mexico. Okay, well, here's what we'll do. Trump delays tariffs on most goods from Mexico for a month, another month. I can't believe it. And now I wonder what kind of deal was made. You'll recall that the tariffs were supposed to go into place on March 4th against Mexico. but the Mexican president called Donald Trump on the telephone to say that she was going to surrender everything. She said she was going to put 10,000 Mexican troops on the border to try and control migration across the border, which, of course, we learned later on they had already committed to under Biden. But she said the same thing again, only this time to Trump, and Trump said, okay, you get an extra month. But, of course, everybody also recognized that he was going to stretch this out month to month and try and extort something new each month in order to suspend things for another month. But I'm not certain whether that's something that he can keep track of. And it may very well be the case that the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, may be able to get on the phone with him at this point and say, Sir, please, if you'll give us another month, we'll commit 9,000 troops to the border. Oh, it's a huge victory. 9,000 troops will be at the border. And then next month, 8,000 troops, sir. 8,000 troops. It's getting better and better every month. I don't know what's going on. The Denver Post is the story I grabbed here, but that's an AP story that they're running. Trump changes course and delays some tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Trump's tariff plans have caused the stock market to sink and alarmed U.S. consumers. And on the one hand, as he makes these announcements, the stock market plummets and then he reverses himself. And you might think he's being influenced by seeing the stock market dive. Maybe. But also other people have also suggested, I'm just saying, the suggestion is out there, that he may be threatening tariffs, watching the stock market dive, and then telling his sons, when I'm gonna reverse these things. So what you do is go in and buy all these stocks that have taken a nosedive because there's tariffs, and then I'll announce, no tariffs after all. And when the stocks rebound, you sell them, we make money, and we'll just keep doing this every month. Maybe that's going on. I don't know. You'll never find out. And if you do manage to find out, what are you going to do? Tell the SEC? Trump will just say, well, you're not allowed to investigate that. You're fired if you investigate any of those things. So there you have it. And instead, as a matter of fact, instead of investigating me, I'm going to investigate anybody who said that this was happening. We'll put the SEC on them. And the SEC may very well comply with that. I don't know. But like I said, the AP reported this. Christopher Rugaber, maybe it's probably not Rugaber, like Build-A-Bear, but Rugaber, R-U-G-A-B-E-R. Sorry, the AP economics writer. Everybody should know the AP economics writer, or one of them. This one, anyway. Trump, Thursday, postponed 25% tariffs on many imports from Washington and some from Canada for a month amid widespread fears of the economic fallout from a broader trade war. Or maybe it's all just part of a stock pump and dump scheme. Who knows? The White House insists its tariffs are about stopping the smuggling of fentanyl, but and the taxes proposed by Trump have caused a gaping wound in the decades-old North American Free Trade Partnership, and Canada has felt compelled to quickly take aggressive countermeasures. Trump's tariff plans have caused the stock market to sink and alarmed U.S. consumers. And in addition to these claims about fentanyl, Trump has insisted that the tariffs could be resolved by fixing trade deficits and emphasized while speaking at the Oval Office, for some dumb reason, that he still plans to impose, quote, reciprocal tariffs starting on April 2nd. Another month. Wow. Well, most of the tariffs go on April the 2nd, Trump said before signing the orders. And then we have some temporary ones and some small ones, relatively small, although it's a lot of money having to do with Mexico and Canada. With a scrambled brain just trying to come up with, a topical sentence here. We have some temporary and small ones, relatively small, though it's a lot of money having to do with Mexico and Canada. I know. These are tariffs on Mexico and Canada. Yes, sir. Good boy. It does have something to do with money from Mexico and Canada, doesn't it? Yes. Who's a good president? Not you. Not you. No, you're a bad president. And no more poopies in the White House. All right. Anyway, Trump said he was not looking to extend the exemption on the 25% tariffs for autos for another month. Is that right? Imports from Mexico that comply with the 2020 USMCA trade pact. And by the way, what doesn't comply with it? I'm not even certain. They keep saying it. Well, if you comply with it, we'll let you in. Well, I mean, didn't everything have to comply with it? I don't know. I'm not even certain anymore what he's talking about. But imports that comply with the USMCA trade pact would be excluded from the 25% tariffs for a month, according to the orders signed by Trump, maybe. Imports from Canada that comply with the trade deal would also avoid the tariffs for a month, while the is it potash? How do you even say this? The U.S. farmers import from Canada would be tariffed at 10%. These are for fertilizer. The same rate at which Trump wants to tariff Canadian energy products. By the way, the Canadians have had some other ideas about the energy products, and Doug Ford, who's the premier of the Ontario province, do I have that title and everything correct? Apparently, Canadians provide several northern tier states, about I think 3 states get a significant a portion of their electricity through Canadian providers in Ontario, and they are adding retaliatory tariffs to that. They're going to upcharge 25% extra on the cost of that electricity, and they're happy to do it. And I don't know. And then Trump suddenly, he just learned that retaliatory is a word that other countries also use. And he's very upset about this. And I think at one point earlier in the week, when it was announced that Canada would impose their own 25% tariffs on American imports in retaliation, Trump was incensed. You can't retaliate. That's for us to do. If you retaliate and add, and then you have 25% tariffs on your stuff, and we have 25% on ours, I'm going to add another 25%. So now there's going to be a 50% tariff on imports from Canada because reasons. Anyway, roughly 62% of imports from Canada would likely still face these new tariffs because they're not USMCA compliant. I do not really know what that's about. According to the White House official who insisted on anonymity, of course, half of imports from Mexico are not USCMA. Is it MCA? Yeah, it is MCA. They just typoed it here. Not compliant, and they would be taxed under the new orders, allegedly, signed by Trump. And allegedly signed by him, too. We don't know that he signed that. He signed something. Claudia Sheinbaum, of course, has planned to announce any retaliatory measures on Sunday, but Trump credited her with making progress on illegal immigration and drug smuggling as a reason for, again, pausing tariffs that were initially supposed to go into full effect in February. So we've been through this before. So I think I want to do some reading on what do they even mean by compliant versus non-compliant goods. I'm not certain what those categories mean. But anyway, I wanted you to know that once again the tariffs have been delayed 2 weeks to 2 weeks to 2 more weeks, some very other short period of time. More, nonsense and familiar bluster from Trump. Okay, other things that I put aside. This one I wanted to get on the record too. You know about all the various lunatics and Nazis who are being employed in the United States government. But it's been a real contrast, by the way. Let me just also point out, like the comments I was reading to you from Atrios yesterday, I guess related to that. Throughout the Obama administration, throughout the one term of the Biden administration, the relationship with Democratic activists, bloggers, podcasters, etc. It has been, we'll invite them over to the White House from time to time to show that we see them and that we have a digital outreach office here. And I mean, they did some work and they invited people in, and it was nice to see that they would reach out and speak to those audiences, but it's nothing like what's going on in the Trump administration, which, while it's a bad idea because some of those people are in fact insane and have no idea how government works, it may be the case that many of our own folks have little to no idea how government works, but they're rarely quite as insane, and very few of them are Nazis. And yet it's been a tremendous thing watching the number of really unacceptably outspoken weirdos that the Republicans have said, I'm going to convert that person into a government official. And there's nothing like that. Even discounting for the fact that, we flatter ourselves to think that among Democratic activists and podcasters and bloggers, people are not Nazis, or at least not, and on top of that, not completely outspoken lunatics. Not that Republicans would ever believe that, but it didn't matter, because the closest you'd get to the White House is the occasional invitation to a group that's focused on speaking to people that they really are attempting to keep at arm's length all the time. Anyway, among the very many people who have been exposed as having authored neo-Nazi websites or posted all sorts of neo-Nazi type material on social media, we have a new one, and this one is of some interest. The Nexus Project on Blue Sky posted this one. Some of the anti-Semitic conspiracy theories and associations of the Pentagon's new Deputy Press Secretary, one Kingsley Wilson. This young woman pictured beneath has been amplified online, including the one that I saw circulated very widely, and about which I'm frankly was just not all that familiar, which is astonishing given, my connections to the Jewish community. But I'm sad to tell you that I wasn't, or I guess I'm happy that I was never really familiar with the apparently long debunked lies about one Leo Frank. We could tell you a little about them. And it's a matter of history. I'm sure that at some point in, back in Sunday school that this was mentioned along the way, and this one didn't stick with me. But apparently she has amplified long debunked lies about Leo Frank. Of course, amplified the Great Replacement theory, about which we're more familiar because it's current events these days. Though now the Leo Frank thing is too. Celebrating Christian nationalism and praising Germany's far-right AfD party. But apparently the Leo Frank thing is a famous and old trope. This also links to JewishInsider.com's write-up of the whole situation. Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson is a prolific purveyor of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, several of them, I guess. The Trump appointee compared the slaughter of Israeli babies by Hamas to abortion. Everyone wanted that connection to be made. Shortly after the October 7th attacks, Matthew Cassel writes this for Jewish Insider, Kassel. In case you need to look it up, Kingsley Wilson, the Pentagon's new Deputy Press Secretary, is facing backlash over a series of recent social media comments, recent ones, in which he has promoted anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, opposed U.S. aid to Israel, by the way, which I thought all the Christian nationalists loved, but I guess not, going back to the old ways on that one, and amplified Kremlin talking points. Oh no, that is bad, and it's bad enough for a regular American, much less for a Pentagon spokesperson, among other remarks that raised questions about her elevation to a key role at the Defense Department. In social media posts that are now drawing particularly fierce scrutiny, Wilson attacked the Anti-Defamation League for doing what? This is where we get the story. Memorializing the lynching of Leo Frank. That's how Leo Frank became famous. A Jewish man widely believed to have been wrongly convicted of raping and murdering a child over a century ago in Atlanta. So ADL says, isn't this terrible? And she says, no, it isn't. Because why? Quote, Leo Frank raped and murdered a 13-year-old girl, Wilson wrote in response to the ADL in 2023, repeating her claim just over a year later. He also tried to frame a black man for his crime. The ADL is despicable. In a statement to Jewish Insider on Wednesday, which I can't tell you about because now there has been a pop-up, and they clearly do not want anybody to share their stories, apparently. Can I get rid of this thing, or is this going to stick forever? This is about making me subscribe to their newsletter. Well, I'm not going to do that, but I guess I'm also not going to spend any time on this story from Jewish Insider either. But anyway, that answers the question relatively quickly and clearly about who is Leo Frank, if you've never heard of him or don't remember hearing about him. But I also wanted to add to the discourse the comment of Don Moynihan, always on top of things, who says, by the way, the things that she said, ADL is despicable, Leo Frank is guilty. He actually did do this crime, even though it's widely, I guess, the view historically that he was wrongly accused of this thing. she perpetuates the story nonetheless. If a university spokesperson was doing this, right, it would be national news, and it would be the Republicans flacking it too. National news and used as justification for the federal government to defund that university, right? Oh my goodness, we can't have anti-Semitism on campus. We got to get rid of this. But as a Pentagon spokesperson, I guess it's A-okay. The truth is that anti-Semitism is just one of the excuses they're using to justify destroying independent institutions like our American universities. And this is a very clear example of how that plays out. All right, let's see. Other things that I wanted to include in today's roundup, somewhat lightning round here. Maybe we get away from the lightningness of it by reading some of these things, which are a little bit longer. You know what? Let me jump. I know there's a million other things that absolutely needed to be discussed. By the way, I guess in the vein of this weirdo at the Pentagon, I'll also add this NPR story that let us know that a far-right influencer, and one of the worst, it's Jack Posobiec, right? Pizzagate guy. Far-right influencer is getting invitations to travel with Trump cabinet members. Apparently invited on an overseas trip with Pete Hegseth, but it's a little unclear about whether he actually accepted that one. But also has been included in a overseas trip with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to Ukraine, of all places. Now, at least he's not actually serving in government, but, while there were, of course, efforts to include influencers, podcasters, etc., on the Democratic side and Republican side over the past couple of years, depending on who's president, this is a guy you should be keeping at arm's length, and they're just not doing it. And I guess in that atmosphere, it becomes less surprising that they also have an anti-Semitic conspiracy theorist working as a Pentagon spokesperson. A couple other stories that are longer reads that really should be getting attention, but we're going to have to pick and choose. And this one's been sitting in pocket for a little while, and it's becoming a more popular story. I'm seeing it shared. It's being shared more and more these days. And this is something Rosalind McGregor sent me. And there's another waiting to be read too, but she sent me this one a while back. Back when we were laughing at / crying about the conspiracy theories being circulated by Elon Musk and others about the gold in Fort Knox. So let me look at this one, because I see more and more people are mentioning it, and you need to be in the know. So let me add what I can from this, although I don't know how much of it will make it on air. A scam built atop an accounting gimmick wrapped in... What's it wrapped in, Greg?
That's bullshit.
Exactly. Why visiting Fort Knox is not about selling gold, but is about buying Bitcoin. And I think we all knew this one was coming, but here are some actual organized thoughts about it from Crisis Notes, or Crises Notes. That's the URL of the Substack-like looking thing here called Notes on the Crises, from who's our writer? Nathan Tankus, Tankus. What's going on here? An ongoing series of notes on stupid things that are circulating. Why visiting Fort Knox this time is about selling gold, but buying Bitcoin. An extensive series, but today's entry in Notes on the Crises Investigative Journalism Source Wish List can be found here as well. Let me get down to the story here. This is all introductory material from Nathan Tankus here. The Bitcoin Strategic Reserve is something that gets mentioned every once in a while. Something I've wanted to write about, he says, since the day before all hell broke loose on January 31st. Now that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are set to visit Fort Knox, and that hasn't yet happened, I don't think, the famous home of the United States Treasury's gold stock, it's time to write about it. You might be asking yourself, well, wait, how do these topics relate, Bitcoin and the visit? Well, amazingly, they are intimately and causally connected. Visiting Fort Knox is a publicity stunt to get Congress to back an accounting gimmick that will fund a Bitcoin reserve. Still unexplained in terms of need, as far as we know. It is, as the title of this piece says, a scam built upon an accounting gimmick wrapped in bullshit. And now let me explain how. The stated reason Musk and Trump are visiting Fort Knox is to, quote, make sure the gold is still there, which is about as dumb a cover as you could come up with. Trump, for example, has said in a speech, and really more than one speech, we're going to open up the doors. I'm going to see what gold we have there. We want to find out, did anybody steal the gold in Fort Knox? This, of course, originated with Musk, who has been tweeting about this nonstop, or at least was a couple of days ago before he got distracted or took more ketamine, I guess. Take, for example, a tweet from last week, it's now a couple of weeks back, where he says, looking for the gold at Fort Knox, and includes an image of a meme based on a scene in a South Park episode where a character says, and it's gone. Not the gold, but just some other dumb thing. While visiting Fort Knox is likely meant to boost Musk's Twitter by live streaming the visit on the platform and plays to conspiracy-minded Trump supporters who have theories about Fort Knox's gold, these are not the substantive underlying reasons. And probably the reason it hasn't happened yet is I don't think they're going to be letting you live stream from this. The previous media that they've allowed in there has only been posed, grainy, black and white photographs that the Treasury takes and controls. And you're not even allowed to wear a jacket for fear that you might stick some gold in your pocket or something. I don't know. The idea of live streaming seems to me like, well, why don't you live stream from a casino floor and see how that goes, right? It shouldn't work. Will he make them knuckle under somehow? I don't know. I don't know if he can. Or this one will take a while, I would guess. The underlying reason, though, he says, is most likely this Bitcoin strategic reserve proposal. We'll get to what that proposal is later. We might not, actually. But for now, we'll start with the gold connection. For new readers, this will be an introduction to a major theme of this newsletter, the surprisingly important but neglected field we might label the law and political economy of governmental accounting gimmicks. Sounds intriguing. Good weekend reading. In fact, during the summer of 2023, I started working on an extremely long and exhaustive history entitled The Treasury and Federal Reserve's 70-year history of accounting gimmicks and legal tricks to avoid the debt ceiling and default. In subsequent research that fall, I updated it to an 85-year history when I came across a fascinating episode during Roosevelt's administration where he wanted to use a wide array of accounting gimmicks to avoid raising the debt ceiling in 1939, right at the beginning of the modern debt ceiling. That history was so long and sprawling, I got pulled away from finishing it and publishing it. I hope to get that done in the next couple of months during a period when things hopefully a little less hectic. No, that's not going to happen. A part of the article about the gold and how in the current organization of our legal system, the Treasury's gold holdings are not actually about the gold market at all. They are about intragovernmental accounting instead. Readers of my colleague and friend, economist Stephanie Kelton, will have already gotten a preview, we haven't, of my research in her article on Monday on the Trump-Musk Fort Knox visit. Here's what I wrote on this basic gimmick 2 years ago in that unpublished manuscript. And here's the quote. First up, we have the oldest example I'll discuss today, monetizing gold. The history of the U.S. holdings of gold is long, complex, and beyond the scope of this piece. For today's purposes, the main thing that matters is that the United States government has lots of gold, and the Treasury has a handy way of filling up its bank account based on that gold without changing anything at all. Instead of having to actually physically transfer gold, the Treasury can issue gold certificates based on its gold holdings. Even better, it doesn't have to sell those gold certificates on the private market. It can just sell them directly to the Federal Reserve. Sure, the Fed is kind of complicated and weird. As the New York Federal Reserve's longtime in-house historian Kenneth Garbade put it, the action did not affect monetary policy. It merely replaced one asset, the Treasury notes, with another, the gold certificates on the Fed's books. You could replace gold certificates with platinum coins, and nothing would be fundamentally different. What matters is that this is an intragovernmental accounting change, which changes nothing of substance for the rest of the economy except avoiding government default as a result of the debt ceiling. Now back to his own writing. The key to understanding this is the Federal Reserve is not going to be selling these gold certificates to the private sector, nor is it or anyone else going to cash them in for the gold. So, if the certificates are just a book entry in some accounting ledger, why does it matter that they are gold certificates? Couldn't you just sell an avoiding the debt ceiling certificate, which promised redemption in avoiding the debt ceiling brownie points? The answer is yes. The Treasury would just need legal authorization to issue avoiding the debt ceiling certificates. This only sounds sillier than gold certificates because it's more honest. The key to bullshit is it sounds good to the uninitiated, and nothing sounds better to those who don't know much about finance than gold. In this sense, using the legal authority to mint $1 trillion platinum coin, remember that, is the opposite of BS. Those of us who long advocated using this legal authority to avoid default, frankly acknowledge that it's an accounting gimmick and use the opportunity to educate the public about money rather than dupe it. Just last month, I released a 2013 Federal Reserve memo that I got through FOIA requests about what the Fed would do in case of a debt ceiling-driven default. And in that article, I provided a refresher that linked to myriad pieces I've written on this topic the past 5 years. So please check that out if you're unfamiliar with what I'm referencing. And I certainly am. And I'm already regretting spending the time on this article because the introductory materials alone are eating up the whole show. But that does bring us back to the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve. This legislation takes advantage of just how good gold sounds to the layman, emphasis on the men, to propose funding the Bitcoin purchase program with gold certificates. Bitcoin acquired in the Bitcoin purchase program goes into the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve that will involve cold storage, quote unquote, cold storage of Bitcoin. Yes, really. The legislation actually goes further and has the Federal Reserve hand over its existing gold certificates and buy them back at a new fair market value price. The Federal Reserve would be ordered by the legislation, if signed into law, to simply send the Treasury the difference between the old price and the new price to the Treasury General Account, TGA, which I know almost nothing about. Here's the relevant section of the Bitcoin Act of 2024, whose purpose is described as to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve and other programs to ensure the transparent, how will this ever become transparent, management of Bitcoin holdings in the federal government to offsize costs, utilizing certain resources of the Federal Reserve System and for other purposes. Still sounds to me like people who got stuck holding the bag with Bitcoin and can't find buyers for their gigantic reserves to simply make the government do it for them. Here's some automatic profit.
You have been listening
Please enjoy.
to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
All right. Well, it seems to me like you could probably dedicate an entire show to this thing and still not get through it. It certainly will never become transparent, but at least you'll have something to read over the weekend if you're interested in figuring out what's going on. And if you would just rather relax and have Justice Putnam tell you what's going on, the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy comes up next right here on Netroots Radio, and we'll take care of that need. We'll see you next week.